You waited. You wondered. You overanalyzed every text he didn't send. And now, out of nowhere, he's back. Just like that. Your heart skips. Your brain races. But here's the truth. How you respond right now will set the tone for everything that comes next, whether it's closure, a comeback, or complete chaos. This is not just about a text. It's about your standards, your self-respect, and your power. You don't need to panic or play games. You need a plan. In this video, I'll walk you through exactly what to do, how to think, and why your response needs to come from power, not panic. Let's talk about what's really going on and what he's really thinking so you can stop spiraling and start leading. The worst thing you can do when he finally reaches out is respond like you've been waiting by the phone. Because if a man disappears and comes back to find the door wide open with zero resistance, he learns one thing: he can come and go as he pleases. Silence should not be rewarded with immediate access. That kind of access is earned, not given, especially when you've had to rebuild your confidence in his absence. When you respond instantly or too warmly, you're teaching him that emotional neglect has no consequence. Most women make the mistake of replying too quickly, thinking they'll seem cool or unbothered. But here's the psychology: men are wired to value what they earn. When something comes too easily, especially after they've pulled away, it doesn't feel valuable. If he ghosted or went quiet, then suddenly pops back with a "hey," and you reply in minutes with warmth and availability, you've just reset the power dynamic in his favor. And chances are he's not even aware of it. But his brain is registering your reaction as a green light to keep repeating the same behavior. When a man pulls back, it's often to regain control, assess his options, or see how much space you'll give him. Sometimes it's emotional immaturity. Other times it's plain selfishness. Either way, his silence speaks volumes. If you respond the second he comes back, it tells him his silence didn't cost him anything. That's not love. That's training. You're unintentionally reinforcing bad behavior by giving him what he wants, your attention, without making him work for it or clarify his intention. Instead of jumping to reply, slow everything down. Pause. Think. Ask yourself, what do I actually feel right now? Does this message align with the energy I need in my life? Men notice when a woman holds herself with value. When you immediately reply, it sends a message without words: you're not just available on demand. And no, that's not playing games, it's setting standards. You're not punishing him, you're protecting yourself. There's a difference. A lot of women confuse kindness with access. You can be kind and still maintain your boundaries. You can acknowledge the message without opening the door wide. A simple "hey, I saw your message, been busy, I'll reply when I have a moment," can buy you time while reminding him you're not waiting in the wings. Don't pretend you're fine if you're not. Don't fake chill just to keep him interested. That's how you end up in a loop of silence and sudden reappearances. Let's be honest, some men reach out not because they miss you, but because they miss the attention. They want to know they still have a grip on your emotions. So when you give them instant validation, they feel powerful again. But when you withhold that validation and protect your peace instead, it forces them to reevaluate their approach. That's when you'll find out who's serious and who's just circling back because they're bored or lonely. You deserve consistency, not crumbs. And if he vanished without explanation, then casually resurfaces like nothing happened, your reaction needs to reflect your growth, not your loneliness. The version of you that sat up wondering why he went silent isn't the same woman who replies like nothing happened. You've changed, you've healed, and your response should make that clear without needing to say it outright. Access to you is a privilege, not a right. If he walked away, that door doesn't swing open just because he decided to knock again. Let your silence teach him the value of your presence. When you withhold immediate access, You force clarity. You create a moment where he has to ask himself what he truly wants, not just whether you're still available. And if he doesn't like that pause, that's his discomfort to sit with, not yours. When he finally texts you after weeks or months of silence, your brain wants to turn it into a romantic movie scene. That's not love, it's fantasy. The problem is, you start filling in the blanks with what you wish he meant, instead of facing what his actions have already shown you. You assume his message is a sign of regret, change, or realization. But in reality, it could be boredom, ego, or convenience. And if you don't pause to separate facts from feelings, you're going to walk straight back into a situation that already broke you once. Romanticizing his return is how you set yourself up for emotional whiplash. You remember the good times, the chemistry, the potential, but you forget the confusion, the mixed signals, and the fact that he vanished without clarity. When a man goes silent, it's not an act of love, it's avoidance. And when he comes back, it doesn't mean he's had some deep transformation. Most of the time, it means you were easy to come back to. Men don't always return because they missed you. Sometimes they miss how easy it was to access you. Women often create a storyline in their head to explain his silence. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he didn't know how to communicate. Maybe he just needed space. But those are just maybes. And maybes don't build real relationships. Real men step up. They communicate. They don't disappear and expect a welcome party when they finally show up. And if he doesn't come back with accountability and clear intent, then what you're seeing is not a fairy tale, it's a rerun. Psychologically, women are more likely to attach emotionally through shared memories and imagined futures. That's why his return can feel so powerful. It triggers all those feelings you've stored up. But feelings aren't facts. A hey after silence isn't an apology, it's not commitment, it's not proof that he finally gets it, it's a test. And if you treat it like a grand gesture, you're setting yourself up to get burned again. A man's silence was loud. Don't let a lazy return drown out what he's already shown you. Many women react to his return with hope instead of caution. They believe this time will be different. This time, maybe he's serious. This time, maybe he means it. But if there's no new behavior, no honesty, no real explanation, then what's different? You're not wrong for wanting to believe in change. You're human, but belief without boundaries will break you every time. If the story in your head is more romantic than the reality in front of you, it's time to rewrite the story. Look at how he comes back. Is he taking responsibility? Is he acknowledging the silence? Is he explaining, not just excusing his absence? Or is he just picking up where he left off, hoping you'll forget the gap? When a man is truly changed, you'll know. He won't send a half-effort message at midnight. He'll show up differently, not with flowers or charm, but with clarity, consistency, and courage to face what he walked away from. It's dangerous to assign depth to a man's actions when he hasn't earned it. A quick text can feel like closure, but it's often bait. If you jump at it thinking it's your love story finally unfolding, you'll miss the reality. A man who truly values you doesn't vanish without a word and then return with one. If he cared that deeply, he wouldn't have risked losing you in the first place. This isn't a scene from a love story where the guy runs back in the rain saying he made a mistake. This is real life. And in real life, love is built on presence, not absence. If his return feels magical, but his behavior stays inconsistent, then it's not a comeback, it's a loop. One you've likely been through before. The real magic isn't in him returning. It's in you recognizing the difference between hope and truth. When he goes silent, your first instinct is to grab your phone and obsessively check if he's watching your stories, liking your posts, or coming back with a text. But that silence isn't a signal to scroll. It's a signal to reflect. Use that pause to turn inward, not outward. Because the truth is, your healing won't come from a notification. It'll come from getting brutally honest about your own patterns. That pause was never about him. It was about what you do when you don't hear from him. Women are taught to chase closure. But sometimes silence is the closure. And instead of sitting with it, you start refreshing your feed, overthinking that last message, and rereading old texts, looking for clues. That's not clarity, that's emotional addiction. Your brain is looking for a dopamine hit, not a resolution. Men aren't wired the same way. When they go quiet, it's often because they're compartmentalizing, avoiding or testing space. And while you're emotionally spiraling, he's likely not even aware of the chaos he left behind. You have to be willing to ask yourself the hard questions during the silence. Why am I so triggered when he pulls away? Why does his attention feel like oxygen? What am I afraid of when the communication stops? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they're where the truth lives. And if every time a man goes quiet, you fall into panic or people-pleasing mode, you're not in a relationship. You're in a pattern. And those patterns are what keep you stuck, not the man. Ties. Instead of tracking his silence, start tracking your reactions. Do you start chasing? Do you get anxious and lower your standards just to get a response? Do you try to be more agreeable, more available, more cool? That's not connection. That's survival mode. And it's rooted in past conditioning that tells you love has to be earned, proved, or fixed. The pause is the perfect time to disrupt that cycle. Because if you keep responding the same way, you'll keep attracting the same kind of relationships. A man's silence can trigger wounds that go way deeper than the guy himself. Maybe it's the father who wasn't emotionally present. Maybe it's the ex who always left without explanation. Someone withdraws, and you immediately start trying to pull them back. You're not responding to this man, you're responding to your history. That's why the pause is sacred. It's a mirror, not a punishment. And what you see in that mirror will tell you everything about what still needs healing. There's a huge difference between missing someone and needing their attention to feel worthy. If you can't sit in the silence without reaching for your phone or crafting the perfect response, just in case he texts, you're not grounded, you're performing. And that performance is costing you peace. Men respect women who stay anchored, not reactive, not emotionally volatile, but steady. When he goes silent and you don't chase, it sends a psychological signal that you're secure in yourself. And men respond to that far more than they ever will to desperation. Start using the silence as a strategy, not a setback. Every time you feel the urge to reach out, pause. Ask yourself, what am I looking for? Is it clarity? Or is it comfort? Is it him I truly want, or the validation I lost when he pulled away? That moment of pause is where power is built, not by forcing anything, but by facing everything that rises up when the distraction is gone. Checking your phone every 5 minutes is just a way to avoid checking in with yourself. And if that sounds harsh, it's because sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but discomfort is where change happens. If you don't learn how to sit with silence, you'll always be at the mercy of someone else's attention. That's not love, that's emotional dependency. The pause was never the problem. It's what you do with it that determines whether you grow or stay stuck. When he reaches out after disappearing, your mind goes straight to what you've been missing. His voice, his attention, the little things that made you feel seen. But that's not the real question. The real question is, what do you actually want? Not just what you miss when he's gone. Missing someone is emotional. Wanting something better is intentional. If you don't separate the two, you'll keep getting pulled back into cycles that feel good for a moment and break you all over again. You miss the connection. But connection without consistency isn't love. It's confusion. And confusion is the weapon of someone who doesn't know what he wants, but still wants access to you. That silence you hated wasn't a glitch. It was a preview of what life with him really looks like when things get hard or boring. So when he returns with a casual, "I've been thinking about you," don't let your feelings make the decision. Let your clarity. You don't just want him. You want more than what he's shown. When you only focus on what you miss, you'll settle for crumbs. You'll start convincing yourself that a weak apology counts as growth. that a simple text is effort, and that him saying he wants to catch up is him stepping up. But that's not what real commitment looks like. Real commitment shows up without disappearing first. So when you feel the urge to respond with excitement, pause, ask yourself, do I want a man who checks in when it's convenient or one who chooses me with consistency?
A lot of women get stuck because they confuse familiarity with fulfillment. You're used to him. You've built stories, memories, and future plans in your head. But just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's what you need. In fact, that familiarity might be rooted in past pain, chasing love, proving your worth, earning someone's attention.
So now, when he reaches out, it triggers that old pattern, the one where you abandon yourself just to feel chosen again. Desire without standards is dangerous. You can want him and still hold a boundary. You can miss the good times and still remember how the silence made you question your value. What you want deep down is security, honesty, and effort. You want a relationship that doesn't make you feel like you're constantly being tested or put on hold. And if he's not showing up with those things now, then responding based on what you miss will only recycle your heart rate. Psychologically, men are more likely to return when they sense a door hasn't fully closed. That return is often less about you and more about regaining control or soothing their own ego. So if you don't get honest with yourself about what kind of relationship you actually want, you'll keep mistaking breadcrumbs for a full meal. He'll give you just enough to keep hope alive, but not enough to give you peace. And peace is the thing you keep trading away just to keep him interested. Every time you feel tempted to say yes to his reappearance, ask yourself, what version of myself am I stepping back into? Am I shrinking again just to make space for his comfort? Am I ignoring my growth just to go back to a dynamic that already failed me? What you want isn't someone who comes and goes. You want someone who stays, shows up, and communicates like an adult. And that starts with you holding out for that, not reacting to every breadcrumb that shows up in your inbox. This is the moment where your standard gets tested. Do you choose short-term relief or long-term respect? Do you lean into nostalgia or step into your worth? That pause between his message and your response is where your power lives. And if you keep responding to what you miss instead of what you want, you'll stay stuck in a story that was never written to give you the ending you deserve. When he finally reaches out, after days or even weeks of silence, your first reaction might be relief or excitement. But that's where women often give away their power. Before you offer your presence, you need to protect your peace. That silence wasn't just about him being busy or confused. It was a disruption to your emotional balance. And jumping back in without assessing how it impacted you is how patterns repeat themselves. Too many women make the mistake of valuing connection over emotional safety. The moment a man reappears, they forget the stress, the overthinking, and the waiting that consumed them. But peace is not a luxury. It's your baseline. And anything that threatens it needs to be questioned, not welcomed. You have to be able to ask yourself, does hearing from him bring clarity or chaos? Because a message from him shouldn't feel like a test you didn't study for. If it does, something's already off. Men respect women who don't abandon themselves for attention. Psychology shows that when a woman sets a boundary and sticks to it, it communicates value on a deep, unconscious level. If you always respond quickly, forgive easily, and don't require emotional accountability, he learns that he can disrupt your peace and still get access to you. And that's not love, that's a loophole. He gets comfort while you get confusion. He gets validation while you lose alignment. That's not a fair exchange. You have every right to pause before letting someone back into your emotional space. Your presence is not a free gift he's entitled to. It's something that must be earned through consistency and respect. Just because someone reaches out doesn't mean they've changed. It often just means they felt the void or got curious. But your peace isn't something to be risked every time someone feels nostalgic. Protecting your peace means making choices from your values, not your feelings. A lot of women feel guilty for pulling back, as if being cautious makes them cold or petty, but self-protection isn't bitterness, it's wisdom. You've already seen what happens when you make yourself too emotionally available to someone who disappears when it's inconvenient. Offering your presence too quickly sends a message that your time, energy, and emotional well-being are flexible based on his interest. That doesn't inspire deeper connection. It reinforces the cycle of him coming and going when he pleases. It's easy to mistake a text or a call as effort, but real effort is shown through follow-through. Protecting your peace means watching what he does, not just listening to what he says. It means giving yourself time to observe instead of rushing to engage. If the silence hurt you, it's okay to create space before responding. That's not punishment, it's alignment. You're giving yourself permission to decide what energy deserves access to you now. Silence is not neutral. It creates distance, uncertainty, and emotional gaps that don't just disappear because someone decides to reach out. Before you open the door again, you have to ask, has he acknowledged the silence? Has he shown accountability? Has he demonstrated any real intention to rebuild what was broken? If not, then protecting your peace looks like saying no, even if part of you still wants to say yes. There's a version of you who doesn't jump at every message, who doesn't betray her peace for a moment of validation. That version of you is not cold, she's powerful. She knows that presence without boundaries leads to burnout. She knows that emotional access is a privilege, not a reward for someone's temporary interest. You can care about him and still protect yourself. You can miss him and still say, not like this. Your peace is your foundation. And if that crumbles every time he disappears and returns, you're not in love, you're in survival. Clarity beats closure every single time. Because closure often becomes the excuse we use to keep chasing something that already showed us it's not for us. When he goes silent, then suddenly comes back around, your instinct might be to demand answers, why he left, what he was thinking, what changed. But that energy keeps you stuck in a loop of needing his validation to move forward. The truth is, you don't need his explanation to close the door. You need clarity about who he is and what he's shown you. Chasing closure keeps your focus on him instead of on yourself. You start replaying the conversations, the last text, the things you did or didn't say, thinking maybe if you just understood why, you could finally move on. But this mindset traps you. Because even when you get the answer, it usually doesn't satisfy you, it just opens more questions. Clarity, on the other hand, is quiet. It's rooted in truth. And the truth is, people who care don't vanish, and people who are ready don't confuse you. When he reaches out again after being silent, the fantasy of closure reactivates. You convince yourself that this time you'll get the final conversation, the apology, the emotional payoff you've been waiting for. But that's not how most men operate. According to male psychology, silence is often a withdrawal mechanism, not a strategy for reflection. He wasn't sitting around planning a deep conversation. He probably just thought of you and acted on impulse. Don't turn that impulse into a doorway for unfinished business. It's common to think closure will give you peace. But peace comes from boundaries, not answers. If you saw inconsistency, if you felt unseen, if his silence created stress instead of safety, then you already have the clarity you need. What most women really want is not closure, it's connection. And that desire tricks them into staying emotionally available to someone who has already disconnected. The healthier move is to stop asking why and start deciding what you'll allow next.
There's power in letting things be unfinished. Not every situation needs to be neatly resolved. In fact, the need for a tidy ending can become the rope that ties you to chaos.
You don't need to hear that he regrets it, or that he was confused, or that he's working on himself. None of that changes how his silence made you feel. His absence already gave you information. Don't ignore what's obvious just because it wasn't wrapped in the closure speech you were hoping for. Chasing what doesn't serve you costs more than you think. It drains your energy, delays your healing, and trains your nervous system to crave emotional roller coasters. The more you make excuses for someone's inconsistency, the more you lower your own standard without even realizing it. A message from him doesn't mean progress. A phone call doesn't mean accountability. If he's not showing up consistently and communicating clearly, then clarity means accepting that, not waiting for it to change. You owe yourself peace more than you owe him a response. And peace doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it comes from looking at the silence, the inconsistency, the bare minimum, and deciding you want more than that. The real flex is walking away without needing one more word. Because when you're grounded in clarity, you don't go back to confusion just to feel temporarily connected again. That's not healing. That's self-abandonment. Getting honest about what's actually happening, not what you hope is happening, is how you reclaim your power. Stop asking what he thinks, what he feels, what he meant. Ask yourself, does this dynamic feel good, feel safe, feel like growth? And if the answer is no, that's your closure right there. You don't need to chase him to find it. You need to trust that clarity is enough to set you free. Mirror his effort, not his excuses. Because that's the difference between responding with self-respect or reacting from insecurity. When he finally reaches out after silence, it's easy to fall into the trap of doing all the emotional labor just to keep the conversation going. But if his return is casual, inconsistent, or vague, matching that energy only teaches him that bare minimum effort still gets access to you. Women often respond to silence with overcompensation, explaining, defending, texting long paragraphs, trying to make up for the emotional gap he created. But here's the truth. If you're the one carrying the entire interaction, you're not in a relationship, you're in a performance. Men are very aware, whether consciously or not, of how much effort they're investing. When a woman mirrors their excuses instead of their effort, they learn they can do less and still stay connected. Excuses from men often sound like, I've been busy. I just needed space. I didn't know what to say. These are not effort. They're justifications. And if you answer those justifications with understanding and emotional openness while he's giving you breadcrumbs, you're training him to see your availability as unconditional. That's not love. That's imbalance. Mirroring effort means asking, is he showing up with clarity, consistency, and intention? Or is he hiding behind excuses, hoping you'll do the emotional lifting? You are not obligated to respond with softness to someone who disappeared when it mattered. Real effort looks like presence, communication, and emotional responsibility. And if he's not offering those things, mirroring his behavior isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. Don't give vulnerability to someone who can't even give you reliability. If his message is one sentence long and 3 weeks late, your response doesn't need to be a full conversation. That's not rude, it's proportional. One of the most common mistakes women make is trying to inspire effort by being overly understanding. But men don't learn through your flexibility, they learn through your standards. If his energy is inconsistent, you matching that inconsistency by dialing back your availability sends a stronger message than words ever will. If he's making excuses, don't argue or convince. Just shift your focus. Let him notice the gap his absence created instead of rushing to fill it. According to male psychology, a man is more likely to respect and pursue what requires his focus and consistency. When you mirror effort instead of excuses, you trigger a deeper part of his brain, the part that recognizes value through earned investment. If everything comes easy and without challenge, he doesn't stay curious and he doesn't deepen his emotional engagement. But when you reflect his true effort back to him, he sees clearly what's being offered and what isn't. It's also crucial not to confuse emotional explanation with actual effort. A man might say all the right things when he returns, talking about how much he missed you or how confused he was. That's not the same as taking action to fix what was broken. Mirroring effort means watching what he does after he reaches out, not what he says in the moment. If he texts but doesn't call, responds but doesn't follow through, that's your cue to step back, not lean in. When someone shows you inconsistency, mirroring their excuses only keeps you emotionally anchored to a half-present version of them. But when you mirror only the energy that's healthy, intentional, and clear, you force them to either rise to your level or step aside. That's how you shift the dynamic without begging, without confronting, and without over-explaining. You simply choose not to give more than what's being given. Watching someone's effort keeps you grounded in reality instead of fantasy. It's how you stay in your power instead of slipping into emotional debt, hoping he'll suddenly show up better. If he's not doing the work, if he's still hiding behind justifications, you don't have to call it out. You just have to stop meeting him where he's not willing to grow. That's how you protect your standards without ever raising your voice. Lead the conversation with boundaries, not emotions. Because the second he reaches out after going silent, your response sets the tone for everything that happens next. If you meet his sudden return with emotional openness and vulnerability before establishing any limits, you're telling him that his behavior didn't have consequences. Men take notes, not from what you say, but from what you allow. And when your first instinct is to express how much you missed him or how hurt you were, you've already shifted the power dynamic in his favor. Responding emotionally to a man who ghosted or withdrew is like handing over your peace without asking any questions. Instead of being centered in what you need, you start operating from what you feel. But feelings, especially after emotional abandonment, aren't always rooted in truth. They're rooted in desire, fear, and unmet needs. Boundaries are what cut through all of that. They protect your clarity and they make it known that your emotional space isn't something anyone can just walk in and out of. The biggest mistake women make when he reappears is thinking the conversation should begin with emotional honesty instead of personal standards. There's nothing wrong with being open, but if you're open without structure, you end up performing, hoping your transparency will teach him to do better. But in male psychology, the moment you react emotionally, instead of asserting what you expect going forward, he learns he can re-enter your life on his terms. And that's where things start to unravel again. Leading with boundaries doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means being grounded. It sounds like I need consistency if you want access to me, or I'm not open to reconnecting without a clear conversation about what happened. Notice that this isn't anger, it's direction. It sets a bar without begging. And most importantly, it protects you from falling back into a dynamic that already showed you it wasn't stable. You don't owe him immediate emotional access just because he finally decided to circle back. That's a trap a lot of women fall into, thinking their silence or kindness will be misunderstood if they don't instantly reply with warmth. But the truth is, the right man won't confuse boundaries with rejection. And if he does, that's your answer. Men who are serious step into conversations with accountability, not defensiveness. When you lead with boundaries, you're giving him a chance to show who he is now, not who you wish he'd be. It's also important to recognize that re-engaging with someone who disappeared can stir up old feelings fast. Your brain starts filling in the blanks. Maybe he changed. Maybe he missed me. Maybe this is the moment everything gets fixed. But this is exactly when emotions can cloud judgment. That's why boundaries need to be written first, spoken clearly, and protected no matter how good the interaction feels in the moment. If you don't lead with boundaries, your emotions will end up negotiating for what your intuition is trying to avoid. According to male psychology, men respect what they have to earn. If he can disappear and come back without having to face what his silence cost you, he learns that discomfort can be bypassed with charm or timing. But if you require accountability before emotional engagement, you shift the dynamic from reaction to self-respect. It's no longer about him coming back. It's about whether he can come back right. Leading the conversation with boundaries creates structure, and structure leads to clarity. You won't wonder what he's thinking, or if you're doing too much, or whether you're giving him the wrong impression, because you set the tone from the beginning. You didn't wait to see how he felt first. You didn't shape your words to avoid pushing him away. You built a container where only emotional safety and effort are welcome, and that's the only space where real connection can grow. You don't owe instant access to someone who vanished without explanation, and you sure don't owe your peace to someone who didn't protect it the first time. When he finally shows up after silence, that's your moment, not to chase closure, not to fall into old patterns, but to choose yourself with more clarity, more strength, and more boundaries than ever before. Respond like a woman who knows her worth, because the way you answer that message writes the opening line to a whole new chapter. And this time, you're the one in charge of how it goes.